Haere Akine, you don't deserve the privilege of being a free man again. The tearful family of murdered woman Lisa Waka confront her killer as he's sentenced to 13 years behind bars. National's promising its reboot of military-style camps for offenders will be different. Its MP Mark Mitchell is here to explain how. Higher standards and harsher penalties for pokey machine operators. A little blue bird spreading the word, RIP Twitter. And it turns out the kitchen is a little too hot for some to handle. Thousands of Kiwis have ACC claims as, well, things boil over in the kitchen. You can check us out on Sky Channel 83 or Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Marie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. The son of a woman stabbed to death near her Christchurch home says he's filled with sadness, anger and grief. Zakaria Mohammed Hussein has been jailed for at least 13 years for killing Lisa Waka in Sockburn in June. He was a mental health patient at Hillmorton Hospital. Sediana Tunido says his mother's death has left a black hole in his life and he suffers from nightmares.
The endless stream of tears haven't stopped, nor will they anytime soon. It breaks her heart to know how terrified Mom must have been and constantly imagine how she felt at the moment when she was being attacked and realised she was about to lose her life.
Sediana Tunido says Hussein does not deserve the privilege of being a free man again. The Prime Minister has started a flurry of meetings with regional leaders at the APEC summit in Bangkok, with regional security and economic issues to the fore. Jacinda Ardern started with a formal session with the Indonesian President Joko Widodo, who's just hosted the G20 summit. She says there was a need to build consensus in difficult times, a theme she's promoted throughout her week in the region. Ms Ardern has short meetings with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the US Vice President Kamala Harris ahead of her major meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping later tonight. National leader Christopher Luxon claims he's had a very positive reaction to his youth boot camp plan. The proposal to put serious young offenders into so-called military academies has been criticised by opposition parties, youth workers, some business owners, and even former National MP Chester Burrows, a current member of the parole board. But Mr Luxon insists the public is very supportive of the plan.
The New Zealand people expect us to help as a government and a government in waiting, wanting to keep the New Zealand people protected, feeling safe in their own homes and their own businesses and their own community. At the moment, this government doesn't care about that. It doesn't care about the victims, and it certainly doesn't care about these young serious offenders, because nothing's changing and they haven't got a plan and they're doing nothing about it.
Christopher Luxon says the policy will make a positive impact in young people's lives. A dioxin researcher and community advocate has welcomed news a global chemicals company is back in charge of a controversial plant in New Plymouth. Corteva Agriscience, previously the agricultural arm of Dow DuPont, has transferred ownership of its Paritutu plant to Dow. From the 1960s through to 1987, Yvonne Watkins, later Yvonne Watkins Dow, made the toxic herbicide 2,4,5-T in New Plymouth. Andrew Gibbs says the change of ownership is a positive step.
Dow responsible, they ran the site primarily and have the resources to put it right. The important thing is that there is strong independent oversight.
Andrew Gibbs says Dow should be applauded for giving a commitment to cleaning up the site. Demolition of the plant is due to be complete by the end of the year. Australia's Home Affairs Minister has ignored Australia's controversial 501 deportation policy when speaking about the rights of New Zealanders living in Australia. In a lecture at Victoria University, Claire O'Neill laid out the challenges and opportunities the countries share on cybersecurity, foreign interference and domestic policy. Ms O'Neill says work is underway to improve the rights of New Zealanders living in Australia and acknowledges they are treated like second-class citizens. And a large house fire in Lyttelton has forced the evacuation of nearby houses. Fire and Emergency says 4 trucks are fighting the house fire in the Canterbury port town. Emergency services were alerted to the blaze on Ticehurst Road about 2:15 this afternoon. The police say they've assisted with evacuating nearby houses. No one is injured. Police say it's too early to say whether the fire is suspicious. In sport, Triathlon New Zealand says it was optimistic it had done enough to have Hayden Wilde upgraded to a Commonwealth Games gold medal, and as a result is disappointed the appeal has failed. Wilde was given a 10-second time penalty for unclipping his helmet too early during the men's race in Birmingham in July. The penalty cost him the gold, and an appeal was lodged in the hope that 2 golds could be awarded. Tri-NZ boss Pete DeWitt says the threshold to get a decision overturned is high. Meanwhile, a doping violation by a Pakistani wrestler at the Games has seen New Zealand's Suraj Singh upgraded to a bronze medal. The Kiwi Ferns have had their first experience of Old Trafford as they prepare for Sunday morning's Rugby League World Cup final against Australia. The famous venue, home of football club Manchester United, is regularly used for major league games. Kiwi Ferns coach Ricky Henry says the team can sense the history.
Pretty unbelievable, to be fair, how the ground is sort of elevated off, and the crowd is only 2 or 3 metres away from the sideline, and by the sounds of it, there's around 70,000 tickets sold.
Former Black Ferns captain Les Elder has announced her retirement from rugby. The 35-year-old made her Test debut in 2015 and was part of the victorious 2017 World Cup side, but missed out on selection for the recent side. And just 3 days out from the Football World Cup, Qatar is reportedly pressuring FIFA to not sell beer at stadiums. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, the astronomical cost, literally, of those burgeoning numbers of satellites. Composer Victoria Kelly's inspiration from New Zealand's poets and photographers. And a crypto crash. Is it all some kind of Ponzi scheme? Ko Kim Haraho. Join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
We're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. From Northland to Taranaki, including the Central High Country, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Showers, some heavy, with possible squally thunderstorms and localised downpours, especially this afternoon. The remainder of the North Island, also Nelson, Buller and Marlborough, showers turning to rain this afternoon with possible thunderstorms and localised downpours, easing overnight or early tomorrow. Scattered showers tomorrow, mainly afternoon and evening about the ranges, with thunderstorms possible from Whanganui southwards. Canterbury and Otago, a few showers, possibly heavy and thundery for inland Otago this afternoon. Rain developing overnight with heavy falls tomorrow. For Westland, Fiordland and Southland, occasional showers, possibly heavy and thundery about the ranges in the afternoons. And for Kohu, Chatham Islands, low cloud at times. A few light spots of drizzle, but rain developing tomorrow evening. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have news headlines and traffic for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A life sentence for a man who randomly stabbed a mother of 4 to death outside her Christchurch home will never heal her family's grief. 52-year-old Lisa Waka lay bleeding on the concrete in her Sockburn Street in June as her son watched out the window. Her killer, Zakaria Muhammad Hussein, had escaped from a forensic mental health unit at Hill Morton Hospital just before the attack. Neva Chittick was at today's sentencing.
Lisa Walker was walking home from work just metres from her door in Sockburn when she was stabbed to death. The mother of 4 had moved to New Zealand from Fiji in the hope of a better life for her family. Today, her 12-year-old son, Epirama Waka Tunido, who was home at the time of her murder, read out his victim's statement.
I will never forget that day looking out the window, seeing police and ambulances, and her laying on the ground, not knowing that was my mum. Sometimes I can't sleep. I have nightmares and wake up scared.
Around 50 people watched on from the public gallery, some quietly crying, holding on to each other and clutching tissues. 19-year-old Siriana Tunido shared his deep grief at the loss of his mum.
Every day, I'm filled with sadness, anger, grief, and many other overwhelming emotions since the day she died. Most of all, I'm devastated that my unborn child and any future children will never have my mom as a grandmother.
Siriana Tunido also addressed Hussein, who was dressed in orange prison clothing with his head bowed behind the glass wall.
She never hurt a soul and never did anything bad to you, to your family, or to anyone. You will forever be known as a murderer. You don't deserve the privilege of being a free man again.
Eldest child Ipineri Tunido said he was still getting used to speaking about his mother in past tense.
Happiness has been replaced by sadness. Laughter has been replaced by longing. We are now grievers and grief counsellors. We are both in need of healing and unqualified healers. We are siblings hanging on so tightly to our late mother's memories. Remember her smile.
Miss Walker's husband, Nemani Tunido, says their lives have been left in tatters.
Everything we struggled for to build a good life has been shattered. My children are often sad and emotional. I won't ever forget having to tell my children that they have lost their mother.
Martine Robin was a victim of Hussein's 2012 stabbing spree and was at today's sentencing. He held her at knife point inside her delivery truck before stabbing her in the arm.
To say there was butterflies going was an understatement. I haven't seen him since he got sentenced for mine, so it was a bit gut-wrenching. And to hear the judge repeat exactly the same things he was telling them when he was sentenced for me, that sucked.
Miss Robin believes Hussein will never change. Justice Mander handed down a life sentence with a 13-year no parole period. Hussein will also serve an 18-month concurrent sentence for assaulting a psychiatric nurse late last year. Te Whatu order reviews into the incident are yet to be released.
Pokie operators will be on a tighter leash with higher standards and harsher penalties from next year. The government set new regulations with a full review of the Gambling Act to follow. Our reporter Felix Walton was at the announcement.
The new regulations include rules for where casinos can put their machines, mandatory training for staff, and new punishments for venues that don't comply. Internal Affairs Minister Jan Tinetti hopes they'll show New Zealand is taking a firm stance against gambling.
By shining a light on this, we also show what is not acceptable for our people in this country. I'm going to say that the majority of these people in this country do not want to see gambling harms existing for our fellow citizens here.
Mapumaya is a support service focused on problem gambling in the Pacifica community. Director Pesio Ahoni says gambling has been destructive for her clients.
We're seeing it from relationships, breakups, losing your possessions, to the high end or the severe end of around suicide, mental health, family violence, crime.
Ms. Ahoni is particularly excited about the new rules for staff. She says teaching them to identify problem gamblers will have a huge impact.
Most patrons are known by the bar staff because they go to the same bar, they play the same machine, they have favourite machines. So there's already recognition in a relationship there that I believe can be levied, in trying to help people. And I think that's really important.
Problem Gambling Foundation spokesperson Andre Frood says it's a promising first step, but she expects more to come as the government reviews its Gambling Act.
We always knew that this was never going to be a silver bullet, but I guess it raises the bar and it's a step in the right direction, but we're really keen to see what will come out of the review of the Gambling Act.
She says New Zealand's laws desperately need to catch up with the gambling industry.
Sometimes it feels like we're always on the back foot because it changes and develops and evolves all the time. I mean, look what's happening with online gambling.
Pesio Ahoni agrees. She says the Gambling Act is woefully outdated.
Because it was implemented in 2003. So, it's high time, We've got online gambling and we've got online gaming. It's reviewing it because we don't think it's fit for purpose anymore.
Ms. Ahoni is encouraged by the inclusion of new infringement offences, which will make it easier to penalise casinos that don't comply. But she says there's more to be done and her organisation will keep pushing for more changes.
We're going to advocate for more. Minister Tinetti said today, it could lead to, to having no pokie machines in our community, and I think that'll be great.
Minister Jan Tinetti expects the new regulations will come into force by May of next year.
And that was Felix Walton reporting. It's 13 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. National reckons its reboot of boot camps will be different this time round. The revived policy would mean 15-year-olds and up who commit at least 2 serious crimes could be sentenced to boot camp for up to a year. There will be wraparound services when they're out, and National says if it works, they could include even younger offenders. But a number of studies show boot camps are ineffective when it comes to lowering reoffending rates, and a former chief science advisor found found scared straight programs have been shown to increase crime. Well, joining us now is Nationals Police spokesperson Mark Mitchell. Kia ora, Mark. What are these teenagers going to be doing all day at boot camp?
Well, there's a whole lot of activities that they're going to be doing, but they're going to be surrounded by the best possible role models, mentors and leaders that we can offer up as a country, and that's our Defence Force personnel, our police mentors, educators, social workers, and they're going to be given probably the most attention they've ever had in terms of making sure that we invest into them and we keep them out of the adult criminal justice system, because once they get into there, it's much harder to rehabilitate them.
Break a day down for us. Are they going to school? Do they go to maths class? Do they go to English? What else do they do?
They'll get up in the morning. I mean, you're getting right into the detail, but from my experience with LSV, they'll get up early in the morning. They'll do team-building exercises. There'll be some time in class to see what sort of needs they need around educational. There'll be some vocational guidance and support coming for them. And then they'll be back out doing some more exercise, doing some more team-building exercise with Defence Force personnel.
Where are all these staff coming from? Teachers, we've got a shortage of them. Who's going to teach them?
Well, there's staff already there doing the LSV projects, the LSV program. So
are you going to end that project, Mark?
Well, you know what?
You're going to end the LSV project and put staff onto this?
No, I don't think there's a requirement to end LSV, but unfortunately at the moment apparently the numbers are down on the LSV, and that's probably pretty consistent with what we're seeing with chronic truancy at the school.
So can you be clear on that, Mark? Because it's important. That limited volunteer program has been quite successful. Do you anticipate diverting money from that program and wrapping it up in order to go ahead with your boot camp program?
We'll definitely keep the LSV going, and our academy can sit along right side of that, and there will be some additional funding for it without a doubt. There doesn't need to be any capital works because we've already heavily invested in the facilities and bases like Whenuapai and
where are they going to be?
Burnham.
You say no capital works required, so tell me where the secure facility is. Was accommodation appropriate for 15-year-olds? Where is that?
Well, we've got them in Whenuapai, we've got them in Trentham, we've got them in Burnham at the moment. We'd also look at places like Wairau.
Got what specifically? Specifically, you have got what there? A youth facility already built, or do you have dormitories for soldiers that you're going to put kids into?
No, there's purpose-built facilities that have been built at these places that we've invested into. So that's not a problem at all.
Fenced, are they, security around the individual area inside a base, or how would that operate?
Well, that's going to be up to the Justice and Defence and how the program is run. But it will be run on military bases. It's not going to be in our youth justice facilities. They're just not equipped or set up to be able to support that. The LSV program has been very successfully run for decades, and they're dealing with young people that are into crime. Some of them have been in jail. They've got dependency issues, and they come in and they spend 6 weeks in a program, and they leave with an 80% success rate going into employment and training. It's been hugely successful. We offer up our best people. But
boot camps haven't been successful. You know the research, Mark. Boot camps haven't been successful.
I completely reject that. The MAC program was successful. You had 15% of the young people that attended that program never reoffended.
I think it was 13%, wasn't it? But okay, that leaves you with what, 80-odd%?
That's a good outcome, Lisa. Instead of a 500% increase in ram raids and 430 this year, and then you've got 57% of those young people, the offending became less serious, and 47% there was actually a reduction in the amount of offending. So
outcomes from that study, Mark, and it's important, outcomes from that study were pretty much the same as for people who had not gone to those facilities. But can we just go back to the volunteer, limited service volunteer program?
So you need to kill off the argument then that they don't deliver.
Mark, the limited service
doesn't deliver.
The limited service volunteer program, they're already set up and operating, right? So if you were going to put your boot camp into another physical location, how can you keep running those other programs? Or are you going to divert all those people to Whenuapai, where you intend to set this up?
Well, that may be the case. I mean, that's a very operational decision. All that we know is that there's facilities there, there's massive capacity, and the program can be run. So that's what we've said that we're going to do, and we're committed to doing that. We're going to target the worst of recidivist youth offenders that are responsible for most of the offending.
Understand the basis for establishing this program, but what we're after is some key details here. Staff preventing them from leaving. So will soldiers guard the perimeter to stop these people leaving, these kids?
No, there's not. Well, there's not going to be staff patrolling the perimeter. Of course not. And if they take these young people in there like they do now with the LSV, they have plenty of young people turning up that don't want to be there. And if those sort of issues arise, then they're going to have to deal with it on an individual basis. And the ones that absolutely just refuse to stay and participate and be part of the program, they may end up in a youth justice facility. I hope that that's not the case. I hope that we've been very positive about this, and we think that it's going to have great outcomes for our young people. We are going to invest into them and make sure that we do all that we can to stop them from going into the adult system.
The investment, Mark, let's talk about that, right? So it is 15 million, you say, Youth Offender Military Academy, new funding, 15 million. 10 million reprioritised from other baselines. So who are you taking the 10 mil from?
Well, we think there's already a big budget there, and there's already funding that's going into these programs or similar programs like LSV.
So which ones are you taking the 10 million off?
So when we're in government, we'll be able to identify where that money's coming from. It may be new investment. We might just say, you know what, this is worth making the investment in our young people.
No, at the moment, your costings say that you were going to get $10 million that you were taking off other programs. So in the interest of transparency, which programs have you identified that you will take the money from?
No, we definitely haven't said that we're taking money from other programs.
Reprioritise from baselines. So you are taking it from other services.
That doesn't mean that it has to be from other programs. We know for a fact this government, there's already wasteful spending going on. There's a huge growth in bureaucracy.
So where will it come from?
So we know that there'll be money that we can find when we get into government and we actually open the books.
Okay, so yet to be determined. But so it works out, if you do the maths, 60 kids you're saying in year one with a cost of $25 million, that's $415,000 a kid. Have you done a cost-benefit analysis? Because you're big on justified spending. So have you done a cost-benefit analysis?
Well, we go, as I said, Lisa, we're not in government and we can't open the books, so we're having to take it off the numbers that are available now in terms of what the cost is. We have probably gone high on the costs because we'd rather do that than go low. We think that it's probably going to be less than that. But we've taken a decision that investment is very important into our young people. It'll save a lot of money in the long term rather than having them fail and end up costing the country a lot more. We think that it's a very, very good, prudent investment into our young people and their futures.
Okay.
We want to turn them around.
So this policy, you've had it before the National Party. Did you talk to Bill English about resurrecting it? Did you get policy advice from him before announcing it?
I worked on this when I was in government, when I was Defence Minister.
Bill English, though. Did you get advice from him?
Well, hang on. Can I just finish my answer? I worked on this under Bill English when he was Prime Minister and I was Defence Minister. And I've spent, for a decade now, I've been out participating with the LSV and supporting it. I've been a patron. I've seen the incredible results that it provides for our young people. And I'm not giving up on these young people that are committing these. They're in terrible situations. The adult gangs are trying to get their hands into them, and we're actually going to take them out of that. We're going to make an investment in them. We're going to make the community safer. There's going to be consequences, and we're actually going to try and turn them around, especially the 15 and 17-year-olds, before they get into our adult system. And I'm backing the program. I'm sorry. Everyone can come out, not everyone, but people can come out and say it doesn't work. It does work. And for every
So, Mark, if you're backing it, we're almost out of time, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is important.
Every Defence Force personnel, every police officer, every educationalist, every social worker that's worked on these programs, the blue light is exactly the same, that's worked on these programs for decades. It's a slap in the face to them to say that they cannot turn these young people around. They have been doing it for a long time and they will continue to do it.
Appreciate your time. We are out of time. Thanks for joining us. That's Mark Mitchell, who's Nationals Police spokesperson. It is 23 minutes after 5. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Boot camps, how they're going to operate, where they'll be, where the money is coming from, whatever is on your mind this evening. Text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time for the headlines now. Ko Evie Ano tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. The Prime Minister has started a flurry of meetings with regional leaders at the APEC summit in Bangkok, with regional security and economic issues to the fore. Jacinda Ardern started with a formal session with the Indonesian President, Joko Widodo, who's just hosted the G20 summit. She says there was a need to build consensus in difficult times, a theme she's promoted throughout her week in the region. A man who stabbed a Christchurch woman to death while she was walking home from work has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 13 years. Zakaria Mohammed Hussein was a mental health patient at Hill Morton Hospital when he murdered Lisa Walker in June. Twitter has told employees that all of the company's office buildings will be temporarily closed, effective immediately. Workers were told the offices would reopen on Monday. 2 airport baggage handlers have been arrested over an attempt to smuggle nearly 5 kilograms of methamphetamine through Auckland International Airport. The men are due to appear in the Manukau District Court on Monday, charged with importing meth. Customs says drugs were found in a backpack which had come on an Air New Zealand flight from Los Angeles a week ago. And researchers at the University of Houston say they've created a fentanyl vaccine in what could be a major breakthrough in the fight against opioid addiction. Those are the headlines. Sorry about my bad eyesight. Fentanyl rather than fentanyl. Looking at traffic, a serious crash has closed State Highway 1 through the Karapiro area between Cambridge and Tito. Police are investigating the crash at the moment. And in Te Waiponamu at Mount Hutt in Canterbury, State Highway 77 is still closed between the intersection with Leeches Road and Inland Scenic Route 72, also because of a serious crash. Our next news headlines and traffic is at 5:40.
Thank you, Evie. New Zealand triathlete Hayden Wild's long wait to find out if he would be upgraded to a Commonwealth Games gold medal has come to an end. Wild appealed to World Triathlon in August about a 10-second transition penalty that cost him the win in the individual sprint in Birmingham. World Triathlon has now dismissed the appeal, leaving Wild with the silver medal. We're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. Well, Felicity, how has he reacted?
Well, as you'd imagine, this is a bit of disappointment for Hayden Wild and for Triathlon New Zealand. They disagree with this outcome. As you were mentioning there, the transition penalty came during the bike stage. So it was as he was transitioning through that bike stage, he was actually ahead of England's Alex Yee. So he was leading the race at that point. According to World Triathlon, the penalty came because he had undone his helmet just before he'd wrecked his bike, which is breaking the rules.
Yeah.
But you can imagine that's kind of a split-second decision. Somebody out on the course has gone, yep, that's that time when that happened. And Triathlon New Zealand has said this whole time, and they still maintain now, that there is actually no evidence to suggest that he actually did break the rules.
Yeah, he said he had his hand on the buckle waiting, and he didn't unclip it until he wrecked his bike. That's what he said at the time, yeah?
Correct, and that is really hard to be able to tell what that actually is. And so they've had a look at video evidence and have been able to tell. So we've taken it back to what the person on the course said at the time, which is why we've come to this result now. You know, a disappointment for him, and he, this whole time, has maintained that he didn't actually want to take that gold medal off Alex Yee. He wanted it to be sort of 2 gold medals, him to get one and Alex to get one, just because of the circumstances that had been through this race as well.
Right. So basically, if in doubt, the testimony of the field official is counted as the last word.
Yeah, he's going to get a chance to maybe get one back on Alex as well. They go into...
Not the same though, Felicity?
Well, a world title. If he wins next week, it's a world title, and it would be the first since 2004, Bevan Doherty, so for New Zealand. So still a big deal, but not quite the medal that he was after.
Yeah. Okay, big weekend for sport. Nevertheless, rugby league, what is the latest from the teams that have made Sunday's World Cup finals?
Kiwi Ferns and Jillaroos will kick off that action at Old Trafford on Sunday morning. So New Zealand had their captains run out on that famous stadium for Manchester United, home of football there. And that's quite a big stadium and quite a different one to what the Kiwi Ferns had actually ever played on. Their coach Ricky Henry today was saying the in goals are quite small, so it's going to be a bit of a problem for kickers or for any of the players that maybe just are running through that area. Stop before you hit the fence, that type of thing. But he's only made one change to the team for this game. It's Autumn Stevens-Daly. She comes back in on the wing. And there's also been some other good news for these players as well. There's a dream team, which is named from the tournament. It's a team of just 17 players across all the men's, women's and wheelchair. So of those 17 players, New Zealand's got 4 named. and that's Amber Hall, Mele Hifanga, Racine McGregor and Joey Manu. So that's quite good news for them. And this Kiwi Ferns game is then followed by the one that maybe a lot of people around the country have seen the flags flying for. That's Toa Samoa versus Australia as well. So that game there, it's maybe you've seen some people jumping on the bandwagon as supporters of Samoa. But this is, if they were to beat Australia, it would be the first time a Tier 2 nation had actually won the World Cup, and a bit of a turnaround for Samoa. They didn't actually win any games at the last World Cup in 2017.
Yeah. Hey, I don't know if this is tacked on the end as an afterthought, but the All Blacks play their last game of the year on Sunday against England.
Was it that obvious? The sport continues back in Twickenham. So, as All Black halfback Aaron Smith says, there's no better test than playing England at home. So this will be the first time that the All Blacks and England have actually played since that 2019 World Cup final in Japan. Maybe we don't go back over what happened there, but this will be seen as the benchmark as to where the All Blacks are actually this season. And in looking ahead as well to next year's World Cup, they bring back in Lock Brodie-Retallick from a 2-week suspension. He comes back in to play his 100th game for New Zealand, and on the opposition side there, Owen Farrell will also be playing in his 100th game. It's a lot of things in the home of rugby in England as well, so it's just a big occasion all round. And it sort of will sign off a season where New Zealand have had 4 losses and 8 wins.
Thank you, Felicity. Felicity Reid, sports reporter. Lots to watch if you are keen. And there is a lot of slicing and dicing going on in kitchens around the country, and we're not just talking about food prep. ACC figures show last year was a record breaker with the highest number of kitchen injury claims in 5 years, and it's costing us millions. More on that shortly, but first, chef and restaurateur Martin Bosley is working with ACC on a safety campaign, and he knows what a minefield a kitchen can be.
I would say it's danger at every turn. There's everything from knives to burns to slips, cuts, catching yourself on the edge of a bench, banging your head on the I mean, all sorts. Everything can go wrong.
So you've been in the biz for a number of years and you've had your share of scrapes. Can you tell us about those, please?
When I was an apprentice, I got quite some severe burns from emptying a fat from the deep fryer over my torso, which led to a lot of reconstructive surgery later on in life from the scar tissue. And I've taken the tip of my finger off before, cutting through some bacon.
What?
Bacon is terrible. Actually, while I'm telling you that story, I'm flicking the end of my finger because I can still remember it.
Have you still got the tip of the finger, Martin? Did it get stuck back on?
It got stuck back. Yeah, no, it got stuck back. I took it to A&E. Well, I was in A&E with the tip of my finger in a tea towel and bandaged up. And in a taxi as well with my hand out the window, blood spraying everywhere. But I saw a chef one day took the stock pot off the top of the stove and put it on the ground. And a chef who was standing there didn't see him do it and stepped back into it and put his whole leg into this, literally just off the ball, pot of stock up to the knee. Terrible burns. I've seen people tip up trays of bacon that were under the grill and fats just run off the tray down the back of their arm all the way down. So burns would be the most common one. But blunt knives, chefs cutting things with blunt knives, guaranteed to cause an injury.
Over your years of experience, give us your list of top tips for avoiding this kind of, hazard.
Chopping boards, right? So a lot of people, they just put the chopping board on the bench and the chopping boards slip and slide all over the place. The biggest tip is put a wet cloth of any description underneath your chopping board, and that will stop it sliding around, and that will minimise a serious number of cuts that you'll receive from the chopping board slipping while you're chopping or while you're cutting. Sharp knives, always keep your knife sharp. A dull knife will result in a really nasty cut, as opposed to a sharp knife, which will give you a nice clean cut. Pot handles over the stove, always turn them in, so there's no handles hanging off the edge of the stove. So if you walk past, you're not likely to catch it on your jersey or a t-shirt or just accidentally bang it and tip it up. Always stir things away from you. That would be another tip. People always, I see people stirring things towards them. That's just going to slop out and go all over you as well. And if you burn yourself, don't rub it. Run it under cold water as quickly as you can, for as long as you can. And if it blisters, leave the blister there. Don't knock it off. Otherwise, you can get nasty infections in there.
And that's Martin Bosley. Well, joining us now is James Whittaker from ACC. OK, James, hit us with the figures. What were they last year? How many claims for kitchen injuries? And what kind of numbers are we talking in terms of cost?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so each year ACC supports nearly 70,000 people to recover from kitchen-related injuries. The thing is, like other injuries, they can be prevented if people slow down a bit, take the time to have a hum and assess risk before they jump in, and then go about things safely. It might be useful to give you some context. So that 70,000 of kitchen-related injuries is more than double the combined number of injuries that are linked to cricket, touch rugby, softball and tennis combined.
Hang on, James. So the sport of cooking is far more dangerous than those all combined?
Anything can be dangerous, and if you don't have your smarts about you, you can get hurt doing anything. But the data tells us there's twice as many injuries in the kitchen than there are to people playing, cricket, touch rugby, softball and tennis.
What kind of injuries are people doing themselves in the kitchen?
All right, we see a lot of burns, just like Martin said. Also, a lot of people are hurting their backs because people slip over in the kitchen. There's often mess around, people around, something could be a bit wet on the floor in there. So people are hurting their backs, they're hurting their fingers, their thumbs, their face, their arms and their hands. Most of the injuries are sprains and strains because if you pick up something heavy and twist in a strange way, or if you fall over, you're going to get a pretty bad sprain or strain.
Cost,
Cuts
James?
are right up there and so are burns. What was that, sorry?
Cost. How much is it costing us to patch these people up and get them back to their full lives?
Yeah. It costs around $78 million per annum for ACC to support these people to get back to, how they were beforehand. And that money funds their treatment, their rehabilitation, transport, sometimes weekly compensation if required, whatever it takes to get them back on their feet.
So it's pretty costly, and it's costly on a personal basis too. If you do something, that means you can't do the things you like, right? So what's your message to people?
My message is, if you assess the risk, if you slow down and have a hum before you jump in, you can keep on doing the things you love. You can stay safe. You can do all your favourite passions and pastimes, get your work done and be there for your family in the way that you'd want to be, Whereas if you get injured, it doesn't just affect you. There's heaps of flow-on effects, for family members, mates, workmates, everyone.
James, just before you go, have you got any war wounds from the kitchen?
A few minor cuts. I've been really lucky. Some people I know have had pretty bad burns and stuff, and in hindsight, they've been able to identify what they could have done, to prevent them. So we've got to turn that hindsight into foresight, and we'll all be better off.
Thank you, James. Really appreciate your time. James Whittaker there from ACC. It is about, 24 minutes to 6. Kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa in Naianei, ko Nona Peltier joins me in the studio. Nona, what's the message from that? Stay out of the kitchen, don't bother cooking?
Well, no, my food bag actually did a report today that suggested customer numbers have dropped. So I guess there's a lot more people doing their own cooking, but maybe they should go back to ordering in. You never know. Yeah,
that's a really good point.
Yeah, no, their net profit was down quite a lot, 37%. Yes, with far fewer customers, 3,000 customers down, and the average spend was also down, and so the number of deliveries dropped 9%. So that means more people are doing their own cooking and ordering, from my food bag less.
I wonder if that's a direct result of the cost of living increase and people trying to trim some money off the bill.
Yeah, well, I would say so. I mean, mind you, the market didn't like that. They dropped my food bag down 15%. Their share price straight down. Yeah. So, but, it wasn't all bad news today.
Okay. Other food businesses, Fonterra?
Fonterra had surprised the market early this morning around 6:30 a.m. With an announcement that they had sold their Chile business Soprole. And they've owned it for a while. They got $1 billion for it. They sold it to a...
What is it?
It's a dairy company.
Yeah.
I guess they make, products and consumer products and so forth. They've sold it to a company called Gloria Foods, which is based out of Peru. And so the company's still looking at a capital return to shareholders at some point, but they haven't ruled out buying extra things. They're also still looking at selling a company in Brazil, and that would be the end of their sales that they've been undertaking for the last few years. So quite interesting from Fonterra. The market was happy with that, and their share price rose 4%.
Okay, Metro Performance Glass, it's cutting costs, laying off staff.
Yeah, so look, it was signaled at their annual meeting, but basically they're saying that they had strategic plans and so forth, but the market has not agreed with them very well. I mean, we've seen a downturn in the housing market. This is a company that provides glass for homes and so on. It's affecting their performance. So what they're saying now is they're going to try and save between $8 and $9 million over the next 6 months or less, because their year ends in March. So they want to try and save $8 to $9 million. They'll be talking to staff. Yes, there'll be layoffs, and also some restructuring in their operations. It's been a tough go for this company. It's just one struggle after another. So, they're expecting their underlying profit, this is for the period ending September, to be about $5.6 million. The market was a little bit neutral on this one. Nothing happened to the share price, but look, it's not great news if you work for Metro Performance Glass and or in the construction sector, because it does sort of suggest that there is a bit of hardship there.
And you got some overall market numbers for me, Nona?
I do, but before we do that, I just wanted to mention A2 Milk. They revised up their revenue guidance, but didn't change their underlying profit outlook, and so the market wasn't too happy about that either, and it fell 2%, but never mind. Overall, the market rose 0.75% today. 86-point gain to 11,381. So pretty good. And you'll be pleased. I'm sure a lot of people who are planning their trips to the United States are going to be happy to hear that the Kiwi is up against the U.S. at 61.6 U.S. cents, a bit stronger against the Australian at 91.8, also steady, a little bit better against the British pound at 51.7 pence. And I just wanted to just take a moment to say that that's against a backdrop of Asia's share market quite cautious and concerns about the U.S. Federal Reserve raising interest rates. So if the New Zealand dollar is holding its ground, that's a pretty good sign for the Kiwi.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite and Nona Peltier there with Business News. It is 20 to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we love your feedback. I'm a bit of a menace in the kitchen, I have to admit. Got a few scars on my hands and other cut marks. What about you, Evie?
Yeah, I've got sourdough burns.
Yep, Evie's got some burn scars on her as well, and we're spending something like $78 million a year on ACC claims for In the Kitchen. Let us know your stories, 2101 on text. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. We would love to hear from you. It's time to go to the headlines. Anea Evie, mena pitspita kōrero.
The Problem Gambling Foundation is celebrating new regulations aimed at minimising harm to gamblers. Internal Affairs Minister Jan Tinetti has announced new rules and harsher penalties which will force casinos to check on problem gamblers. She hopes the changes will show New Zealanders taking a firm stance against gambling. Split migrant families are being offered the chance to have their residence applications prioritised so they can reunite. Immigration New Zealand has told migrants they can ask for their case to be expedited if their partner or children are still overseas. An immigration advisor, Katie Armstrong, says she's grateful for the change, but it should have happened sooner. The Australian Home Affairs Minister has avoided its controversial 501 deportation policy when speaking about the rights of New Zealanders living in Australia. Delivering a lecture titled "We're Not Just Friends But Family" in Wellington, Claire O'Neill has acknowledged New Zealanders living in Australia aren't treated fairly. Ms O'Neill says work is underway to improve that, but she made no mention of the 501 policy under which New Zealand-born Australians are deported here if they commit a crime. And President Volodymyr Zelensky says more than 10 million Ukrainians are without power following Russia's latest missile attacks on its energy infrastructure. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in the Waikato State Highway 1 through Karapiro between Cambridge and Tido is closed while police investigate a serious crash. And at Mount Hutt in Canterbury, State Highway 77 remains closed between the intersection with Leeches Road and Inland Scenic Route 72 because of a serious crash. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Ngā mihi, Evie. The Prime Minister has started a flurry of meetings with regional leaders at the APEC summit in Bangkok, with regional security and economic issues to the fore. Jacinda Ardern started with a formal session with the Indonesian President, Joko Widodo, who's just hosted the G20 summit, but that's just the start of it. Our business editor, Giles Beckford, has been with the Prime Minister on her 5-day trip to the Southeast Asia summit in Cambodia, a trade mission in Vietnam, and finally the APEC Leaders Summit. He joins us now. It sounds like speed dating, Giles. Tell us about the meeting with the President of Indonesia was obviously a bit of a taster for the bigger personalities.
Kira, let's not totally dismiss Joko Widodo. Remember, he did host the G20 meeting. That's the Global Power Club. And so Jacinda Ardern was quite eager in her comments to connect with him and try and get the inside view on what went on there. Of course, it was the big power group with Xi Jinping and Biden. But the glamour hits this afternoon, just about to happen. Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, Kamala Harris, the US Vice President. That means that Jacinda Ardern will have seen the top 2 US elected officials in the space of just a few days. And she had that chat with President Biden in Cambodia. So, as you say, it is the taster for the big thing. Everybody's waiting out for Xi Jinping around 9:30 New Zealand time tonight.
Well, let's hope it goes better for her than it did for Justin Trudeau.
We raised a question with her as to whether she thought that was sort of indicative of the Chinese attitudes, or whether that might cast a bit of a pall over the meeting she's going to have. She said, no, look, people, they work these things through at these summits in their own way, not for her to comment on who might have been discreet or indiscreet and the way they went about it. But she's very much taken, I think, quite a positive view in the past session that we had with her. So whereas she was saying earlier on in the trip, yes, I'll be forthright in presenting our views, and where we've got differences, I won't shirk from using the right language. But the most recent comments that we heard from her were, look, there are going to be differences, but we've got common ground, a lot of shared issues and relationships here that we want to make the most of. So that's what we're going to go for. I don't think she's, expecting anything tangible to come out of the meeting by way of concessions or agreements or whatever. It's the renewal of the personal links, and that's one thing she's shown on this trip that she's quite good at. So she is hoping to say to the Chinese, look, when you've got COVID out of the way, perhaps we might pop up there with a trade mission, remembering, of course, they are our biggest trading partner, and get some of that people-to-people contact back as well. Overseas students, obviously tourists, good earners, but also they just help to cement relations. And so that will be the picture. She says she wants to move the relationship on a wee bit.
So, Giles, who or what else is on the agenda?
Well, in particular, she's looking to, Jacinda Ardern, looking to build consensus in difficult times, and that's a theme that she's been promoting through this week in the region. So at the leaders' gathering, you can expect that will be one line of her contributions. Climate change. New Zealand's just announced that it will give close to $6 million over the next 3 years to help cope with climate change resilience in the Asia-Pacific region, part of a bigger fund that APEC is organising. And certainly she has been pushing that message of sustainable economic growth. She made the comment the other day at the business forum, if we had the women in charge, then a lot of these issues perhaps wouldn't be as dire as they are. But in any event, she's certainly pushing that principled line that sustainability is the future, and it's got to be done through common purpose and common links between countries and nations.
Good to talk to you, Giles. That's Giles Beckford, our business editor, who was joining us live from Bangkok in Thailand. An international court has convicted 3 men for shooting down a commercial plane over Ukraine in 2014. The court found 2 Russians and a Ukrainian guilty of the mass murder of all 298 passengers on board Malaysia Airlines flight MH17. But some say they may never face the consequences of their actions. Soumya Medipati reports.
MH17 took off from Amsterdam, destined for Kuala Lumpur, on July 17, 2014. But 2 hours into the flight, air traffic control lost contact.
Malaysian 17, how do you read me? Malaysian 17.
2 of the people killed were New Zealanders, Otaki man Robert Ailey and Australian resident Mary Minka. Robert Ailey's longtime friend Bill Patterson says they were travelling through Eastern Europe together.
We had a very interesting time there until it was time to come home when Rob hopped on one plane and I hopped on another. And I got the news when I landed back here in New Zealand that MH17 had been shot down.
Bill Patterson says the court's decision brings some comfort.
Total closure would be actually bringing those people to justice, but I think it does bring a sense of closure in the fact that they've got right to the end of the story, right down to the very 3 people that were responsible. So it does bring a type of closure.
Another victim's relation, Jordan Withers, attended the hearing in the Netherlands. Speaking outside the court, he said he would keep searching for answers.
It's a difficult day. Maybe, some of the other victims' families may feel some closure from this, and I really hope they do, because it's a real difficult thing going through your life each day, wondering why this happened and what would lead people to do this.
4 men were tried in absentia, with evidence including intercepted phone calls, radar data, eyewitness accounts, photos, videos, a reconstruction of the wreckage, and even metal fragments found in the bodies of the crew. Investigators were able to identify the type of missile and track its route, from a military barracks in Russia across the border to a launch site in pro-Russian separatist-controlled eastern Ukraine. 2 former Russian intelligence agents and a Ukrainian separatist leader were sentenced to life imprisonment, while the 4th person was acquitted. But the Kremlin has repeatedly denied any involvement. University of Waikato international law professor Alexander Gillespie says it's likely those responsible will never be brought to justice because Russia doesn't recognise the International Criminal Court.
And this is a bigger problem, not just with regards to MH17, but also with all of the war crimes that are going on in the Ukraine right now, and the way that these people probably have a case to answer, but Russia won't hand them over.
Alexander Gillespie says it's possible more sanctions will be applied, but it's debatable whether that will prompt Russia to give up the offenders. He says the question is whether accountability for crimes will be part of any future peace settlement with Russia, because right now, nothing's on the table.
It is 10 minutes to 6. Kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Amid a worrying shortage of bus drivers, a Wellington bus company is targeting the student market for recruits. Transurban is pitching the job as flexible enough to fit around study and a chance for young people to do their bit to curb carbon emissions. Kate Green has the story.
Wellington is short more than 100 drivers, leading to reduced and cancelled services and grumpy commuters. The council-owned public transport operator Metlink has cut peak hour routes, and the regional council is lobbying the government to change immigration rules to attract drivers from overseas. Meanwhile, Transurban, which runs 60% of the region's bus services, is looking to attract a younger demographic to fill 37 driver vacancies. Ethan Hakupa, aged 23, began driving buses a year ago while he finished his degree and recently stepped into the role of recruitment advisor.
The biggest thing I'd ever driven before that was a van, and so came to train, I just hopped in, I was like, this is just ridiculous, like what am I doing sort of thing. And it was just one of the smaller buses too. And then when I went on to the larger ones, it's pretty intimidating, but once you get the hang of it, it's really fun.
Ethan's main route was the number 25 between Kandala and Highbury. It wasn't a career he'd considered until a bus driver friend told him to give it a go.
You kind of have this idea that it's for older people, which is kind of false now because we actually have quite a few young drivers, which is really cool. It's just that whole perception, I guess, that it's not really for students. But I mean, it works really well for students, turns out, yeah.
The pay starts at $27 an hour, with shifts that can work around student timetables. All applicants need is their full driver's licence, as training and heavy vehicle licensing is done through the company. Transurban says the job provides students with important life skills, safe driving, decision-making, assessing risk, responsibility, teamwork and customer service. And importantly for the younger generation, it lets them be a part of the change they want to see for the climate. Here's Samuel Stearmond, Transurban's General Manager for Wellington and Auckland.
You know, we talk about climate change and we have a target to meet full decarbonisation or zero emissions at tailpipe by 2035, and we're on our way to achieving that. And, you know, with younger people now, they're very passionate about climate change and the effects of climate change and reducing that, and this is a very, very good way for them to be able to go and actually contribute something that's meaningful and get paid.
Mr Stearmond says the perception of low pay and poor conditions is just not true. Their wage is competitive, and only 19% of their workload is in split shifts. Nor is the job restricted to one demographic.
First and foremost, if you're a young person, you're going to think, oh, bus driving is for older guys, right? Because traditionally that's the demographic. And, you know, depending on where you are in the country, if it's in a large urban centre and it's an urban environment, generally that's what you will have seen.
Recent statistics from AMI insurance claims show drivers under the age of 25 are 26% more likely to have an accident compared to other drivers. But Mr Stearmond has no concerns about their ability to do the job. Applications, he says, are open.
Evie, could you drive a bus?
Oh, yeah. If I was given the opportunity and had the time, I'd love it. You should see me in a van.
Would I get
Almost
on your
dangerous.
bus? Not so sure. OK. South Auckland streets are set for a Samoan invasion this Saturday. Toa Samoa will play in its first ever Rugby League World Cup final against the mighty Kangaroos of Australia. As the historic kick-off approaches, the passion on the streets is palpable, as our reporter Jonty Dine and cameraman Nick Monroe found out.
Pacific pride is on full display in Auckland. The energy on the streets is electric.
Someone's taking over Auckland right now.
This is huge. We are already going to the world with Toa Samoa making it to the finals. All the best, Toa Samoa, and your people will be there and around the world.
Rain or shine, we are going to be out here celebrating, partying and making history with everyone around the world. Chee-hoo!
Toa's stunning performance has inspired Samoans of all ages all around the globe.
It's a good time to celebrate, not just the Toa, but it's been difficult in the past couple of years. We had the measles, we had the COVID, we had an election that divided the country. Now everyone is coming together.
We've just proven that on a world platform stage that Samoa, an island from the Pacific, can make a huge impact.
Milford again is in position, but they're also going to go back to Crichton. Crichton's got time to try and win it for Samoa, and Stephen Crichton is a history maker.
After being crushed by hosts England in the opening round, Toa made a miraculous turnaround to post a stunning 27-26 win in last week's semi-final.
After that first game, when we got that dropping, it was really hard to even think again about the second game, but it was amazing, all I can say.
It's been an emotional journey.
We have just been very proud of our, you're making me tear up! Very proud of our boys. They've just put us on the map.
The city is cloaked in Samoan flags, which have been flying out the door of this variety store.
Completely sold out the flag.
Of the Samoan flags?
Yeah, all gone. Yeah, very fast.
Yes. What do you think?
Thank you.
Samoa gonna win or what?
Samoa.
Who lost? Win! We'll win! We'll win!
Yeah.
This retailer has lost count of how many flags she has sold and is now down to her last dozen.
Somebody take 5, somebody take 2, somebody take 1. Wow, many customer.
Even All Black legend Sir Michael Jones has been swept up in league fever.
I feel sorry for the people who live close to the Mangere town centre if you're not Samoan or Otara. But even Henderson, Avondale, Pororua, Linwood, Salt Lake City, LA, Brisbane, all over Australia. Obviously back in Apia, that's going to be, something we might not have ever seen, to be honest, if they can pull it off.
The Samoan Kiwi says Toa is doing something very special for all Pacific sport.
Seeing the underdogs do great things and turning a game, a sport upside down, and I think that's what's so exciting. But yeah, of course, for the Samoan community, it doesn't get any bigger.
This is how I support my country.
Sir Michael says Samoans are a proud people with a proud sporting history of slaying giants.
It's the David and Goliath thing, and we love that kind of narrative. We believe in that, and it's doable. And I think, again, the Samoans have shown that, the spirit of the Tō Samoa can do, what some people might think is unbelievable, they make believable.
It may be a daunting task against the 11-time world champs, but win or lose, they have an adoring nation behind them who will celebrate regardless of the result.
Oh, we're gonna win! Samoa gonna win!
Of course they can do it, man. They've got huge support around the world, plus in South Auckland area. Go to the tour all day, every day.
We're gonna party until next year, baby.
It's showtime! Tō Samoa!
It will either be a very late night or an early rise for fans, with kick-off set for 5 o'clock Sunday morning.
Yeah, go Samoa. And if you were listening to that on radio, you can check out Jonty and Nick's piece, the video version. It's worth a look at the pictures. They're so excited. It'll be up on our web page, all those supporters. Your feedback, boot camps. Jim says, since when are our Defence Force personnel expected to be first-class social workers? Stephanie says, Mr Luxon is deluded in thinking the public support boot camps. I'm part of the public and I don't support them at all. This policy is a cheap shot in order to gain votes from a minority. Gary says, I don't like National's big and tough talk. Another says, as a youth worker, I understand that the LSV program is not only for kids who are in trouble, but also for young people who are lacking in direction and are considering a career in the forces. These rangatahi benefit greatly from the care and guidance they receive in this program. Sounds like your guest is likely to cancel LSV to fund the money for his boot camps, which will only, in his words, deal with repeat offenders who are facing jail as an alternative. Completely short-sighted, says Paulette.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening. Mihi o te pō. I'm Evie Ashton. The husband of a woman stabbed to death just metres from her Christchurch home says his family has been destroyed. Zakaria Mohammed Hussein was given a life sentence in High Court today with a minimum non-parole period of 13 years for the murder of Leisa Waka in June. Ms Waka's husband, Nemani Tunido, read a victim impact statement describing the loss of his wife of 26 years.
Every day was difficult now. Everything we struggled for to build a good life has been shattered. My children are often sad and emotional. I won't ever forget having to tell my children that they have lost their mother.
Namani Tunido says he and his children missed their mother's cooking, baking and hugs. National says the young offenders in its boot camps will be supervised by Defence Force personnel, police mentors and social workers. The party's police spokesperson Mark Mitchell says under its plan, if elected, National will borrow staff from the Limited Service Volunteer Programme. He told Checkpoint the children will be surrounded by positive role models.
They're going to be given probably the most attention they've ever had in terms of making sure that we invest into them and we keep them out of the adult criminal justice system, because once they get into there, it's much harder to rehabilitate them.
Although the program will cost $415,000 per child for the first year, Mark Mitchell says he expects it will save money in the long term. The Prime Minister has started a flurry of meetings with regional leaders at the APEC summit in Bangkok, with regional security and economic issues to the fore. Jacinda Ardern started with a formal session with the Indonesian President Joko Widodo, who's just hosted the G20 summit, but that's just the start of it. Business editor Giles Beckford is in Bangkok.
The day started with a one-on-one session with Indonesia's President Joko Widodo, who recently hosted the G20 summit, which Jacinda Ardern was keen to hear the inside talk on. Soon she'll have brief informal chats with Justin Trudeau of Canada and the US Vice President Kamala Harris. But they're the precursors for the main event, a face-to-face meeting with China's President Xi Jinping, the first in 3 years. Ms Ardern says she'll be forthright in talking about security and human rights issues, but she's also looking for common ground and consensus to push the relationship on.
An international law professor says it's likely those who shot down a Malaysia Airlines flight over Ukraine in 2014 will never be brought to justice. A Dutch court has convicted 2 Russians and a Ukrainian in absentia for the mass murder of all 298 passengers on board flight MH17. But Alexander Gillespie from the University of Waikato says Russia doesn't recognise the International Criminal Court.
And this is a bigger problem, not just with regards to MH17, but also with all of the war crimes that are going on in the Ukraine right now, and the way that these people probably have a case to answer, but Russia won't hand them over.
Alexander Gillespie says it's debatable whether more sanctions would prompt Russia to give up the offenders, but says accountability for crimes could form part of any future peace settlement. 2 weeks of discussions at the COP27 climate summit in Egypt are drawing to a close. The issue of giving money to poorer countries to help them cope with the effects of global warming is a key sticking point. Here's the BBC's Matt McGrath.
There's a real sense of urgency here as negotiating teams try to conclude an agreement on a range of complex questions. The most difficult is the issue of loss and damage, or the immediate impacts of climate change that many countries are now suffering from. For decades, the US, UK and others have resisted the discussion, fearing legal liability for their historic role as the biggest emitters of warming gases. Poorer nations want an immediate new fund. The rich are resisting. Delegates are working on a compromise that could be the key to unlocking these stalled negotiations.
Police are still at the scene of a homicide in Napier. They were called to Nuffield Avenue in the suburb of Mariwa just before 4:30 this morning. A woman was found unresponsive and she died at the scene. There's no word yet on whether the police have found the suspect, but they believe they're known to the victim. A tent has been set up outside the property and staff are taking photographs while they examine the scene. The Problem Gambling Foundation is celebrating new regulations aimed at minimising harm to gamblers. The new rules require casinos to check on customers and regularly train their staff to recognise problematic behaviour. Spokesperson Andre Frood says it's a promising first step, but New Zealand's laws have a lot to catch up on.
Sometimes it feels like we're always on the back foot because it changes and develops and evolves all the time. I mean, look what's happening with online gambling. At the moment, pokies remain the most harmful form of gambling in the country, but at the same time we have to be aware of other types of gambling such as online where we're seeing enormous growth.
Andre Frood hopes further regulations will come after the government completes its review of the 2003 Gambling Act. Twitter has told employees that all of the company's office buildings will be temporarily closed, effective immediately. Workers were told the offices would reopen on Monday. It didn't give a reason for the move. The announcement comes amid reports that large numbers of staff were quitting after new owner Elon Musk called on them to sign up for long hours at high intensity or leave. And one person has died in a 2-vehicle crash near Methven in Canterbury. The crash happened at 2 o'clock this afternoon and has closed State Highway 77 at the intersection of Mount Hutt Station Road. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the better brain, how nutrients can be used to treat mental health issues. Dan Slevin with his picks for the big screen and small, and music with Friday Night Live, Phoebe Rings and Mild Orange take to the stage, and Finn Johansson storms the studio as he does every Friday night. It's a pick and mix on Nights with Karen Hay after 7 on RNZ National.
Funded through New Zealand On Air. We're on air on rnz.co.nz and on the RNZ app on your mobile. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. From Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Showers, some heavy with possible squally thunderstorms and localised downpours, easing for a time this evening until tomorrow afternoon. For the rest of Te Ika Maui, also for Nelson, Bulla and Marlborough, rain with possible thunderstorms and localised downpours easing overnight or early tomorrow. Scattered showers tomorrow, mainly in the afternoon and evening about the ranges, with thunderstorms possible from Whanganui southwards. For Canterbury and Otago, a few showers, possibly heavy and thundery for inland Otago. Easing there this evening. Rain developing overnight with heavy falls tomorrow. Westland, Fiordland and Southland, occasional showers, possibly heavy and thundery about the ranges tomorrow afternoon. And for Kohu, Chatham Islands, low cloud, a few light spots of drizzle, then rain developing tomorrow evening. The time is 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A little blue bird spreading the word, RIP Twitter, as staff apparently revolt against owner Elon Musk. Twitter's owner issued an ultimatum to staff: commit to an extremely hardcore culture with long hours and high intensity by 5 p.m. today, or take redundancy and go. US media are reporting a mass virtual walkout of staff following the deadline. Meanwhile, Musk has allegedly closed all Twitter offices and suspended staff entry cards. So is this the Bluebirds' swan song? Here's the BBC's David Willis in Los Angeles.
Well, on Wednesday, Elon Musk gave Twitter employees until today to decide whether to stay with the company and to build what he called a breakthrough Twitter 2.0, or leave with 3 months of severance pay. And he said in a message whose subject line was a fork in the road, that those who chose to stay would be, as he put it, working long hours at high intensity. Well, it seems that didn't appeal to quite a lot of Twitter employees, and reports suggest that hundreds refused to sign the pledge to work longer hours, leaving the company in a state of somewhat disarray, raising questions about how it can keep operating effectively. It's reported that Elon Musk has been holding meetings with some staff who are deemed critical to keeping Twitter ticking over in a bid to persuade them to stay. And he's also reported to have softened his stance on not allowing people to work from home in a bid to talk them round, having previously said, of course, that employees must come into the office to work at least 40 hours a week. Meanwhile, the hashtag RIP Twitter has begun trending, along with hashtag Goodbye Twitter. I mean, within hours of taking control of the company and that $44 billion takeover last month, Mr. Musk sacked the senior executives. He's since laid off half of Twitter's 7,500 full-time employees. He's had another round of firing employees who criticised him. That was early in the week. And there are those who believe that the company is now facing a drastic shortage of engineers. Elon Musk himself has tweeted, "How do you make a small fortune in social media? Answer, start out with a large one." But there is a very serious aspect to all this, because the workforce reductions have apparently included people who work on content moderation and child safety issues, critical issues for this social media platform. And the whole thing has raised the concerns of US regulators as well in regards to privacy. The Federal Trade Commission believes that Elon Musk may have violated a consumer privacy agreement by changing some of the company's data security measures, and the agency has said that it's tracking recent developments at Twitter with deep concern, as it puts it. Now, Elon Musk has brought in a sort of circle of confidants from his other companies, companies such as Tesla and so on, including his younger brother, Kimball Musk. But it seems that he's finding it a lot more difficult to regulate a social media platform than he did inventing electric cars or interplanetary travel.
As you heard earlier, a Dutch court has sentenced 3 men to life imprisonment for murdering all those aboard MH17, which was shot down over Ukraine in 2014. 298 people died in the Malaysia Airlines crash, including 2 New Zealanders. 2 Russians and a Ukrainian were tried in absentia. Russia continues to deny any involvement. CNN's Anne Holligan has been at the trial.
Verdachte Girkin, Dubinsky en Tjatchenko worden veroordeeld.
The judges ruled that the 3 men had set out to bring down a plane, even though they had intended to shoot down a military, not a civilian aircraft. The court found the surface-to-air missile was supplied by a Russian military brigade and fired from territory controlled by Russian-backed separatists. For the relatives at the epicentre of this disaster, this long-awaited Judgment Day brought mixed emotions. When you listened to what was said in there, what was your feeling?
It was grief, anger, relief, anger, grief.
When you look at the world, there's always tragedies happen, but this one was part of me. It's part of my life, and it'll stay there forever. So
the families here have been waiting 8 years for this verdict. And the sentiment among so many of them is that their loved ones were among the first casualties of a conflict which is still raging today. This verdict is a reminder that Russia's military presence in Ukraine started long before this year's full-scale invasion. Many of the victims' families feel this is a vindication of their sentiment that if the world had taken a tougher stance against Russia 8 years ago, that invasion and the geopolitical instability that followed could have been avoided. Among them, Elsemiek's father, Hans de Borst. He cherishes the memories of his only child and her documents recovered intact from the crash site.
It is extremely important to me. That feeling of justice to be done gives a good feeling and gives, I hope, some peace about this subject.
While this judgment can't heal the pain and is unlikely to result in anyone serving life for taking those 298 lives, it has established the truth and has kept the victims' memories alive.
To Australia now, where communities in central western New South Wales are scrambling to limit the damage from rising floodwaters. Parts of the region have already been devastated by inundation, but towns along the Lachlan River are still bracing for the worst. Here's the ABC's Matt Bamford.
In a vacant block behind their home, Forbes residents William Simpson and Gillian Bray have set up camp.
We had the tent and the shed, so, we love going camping. And we didn't have a shade area though, but the people that own the block that we're staying in, they've offered us their, bit of shelter. It's good.
All they can do is watch as floodwaters from the Lachlan River seep through their property.
It's not looking real good. The water is starting to recede, but it's still inside. The floors are still very spongy and, it's not very good.
Like many here, Gillian Bray's life has been turned upside down by the flooding.
This round it was a little bit harder for me. We got the SES to pick up my daughter, who is pregnant, and they ended up chopping her out to have a baby, but it didn't happen. So now we've had to rely on friends to go and pick her up because we didn't have a four-wheel drive or whatever to get through from here to Orange. So they've gone to pick her up. These sort of things are the things that take their toll.
Around 1,000 residents have been displaced here and some 700 properties affected. Forbes Shire Council Mayor Phyllis Miller says concern is now turning to surrounding villages.
Fortunately, we have reached our peak, and when that happens, water slowly starts to recede. Of course, it hasn't yet. It'll take a few days. But the really sad part about it is this water is going to go to our villages outside of Forbes. So Bajirabong, Warroo, Coronella, all of those areas are going to get more flooding. They've been flooded for 4 months, so it's pretty tough on our rural community here in Forbes.
She says they've spent much of that time isolated.
Those poor buggers out there, I dread to think what their mental health is like.
Anne Ernie is a farmer from Bajirabong, 40 kilometres from Forbes. She says the impact on agriculture has been profound.
Everybody in the district won't have a harvest. You may get one paddock, one crop off.
And it's going to take some time before the water disperses.
We probably won't get out for another, I don't know. We really don't know. We don't know because this water is unknown and we've never seen a level at this. We have 2-metre gullies to go through that are streams of water coming.
Further downstream, residents in Condobolin are experiencing the worst flooding on record. Firefighters and Defence Force personnel have been sent to assist. A makeshift levee has been built, but a sandbag shortage is proving challenging. And homes in low-lying areas have already been inundated. Kim Jones from the Railway Hotel has been giving shelter to displaced residents.
We've got probably 12 rooms of evacuees. The mood in Condobolin, we're just a really good, resilient little town. Everyone's pulling together as they always do.
She says locals have been doing all they can to prepare.
The town is buzzing with people, like we've got Rural Fire Service, we've got a couple of helicopters that seem to be here full time that are, rescuing people or moving people if they need to check animals. Farmers have stock, they've had to swim stock out. I've heard some horrific stories of trying to get sheep into boats, swimming cattle through 5 feet of water, pregnant ladies, having to get to different towns to have babies. It's been pretty confronting for the community.
John Medcalf is the Mayor of Lachlan Shire Council.
We've got a natural disaster and something that's unprecedented. We're going to see this sort of weather until March, so I'm not sure how that's going to, but we've just got to bear with it, and what will be, and we've got to work around it because it's a very difficult situation.
Lachlan Shire Council Mayor John Medcalf ending that report from the ABC's Matt Bamford. A small college town in the US state of Idaho has been shaken with fear and grief after the death of 4 students fatally stabbed in their flat. It's been days since their bodies were found, but police are still mystified about what happened and believe a suspect is still at large. CNN's Veronica Miracle reports.
We do not have a suspect at this time, and that individual is still out there.
Many questions and fear in Moscow, Idaho.
The 4 were stabbed with a knife, but no weapon has been located at this time.
Ava Driftmeyer lives nearby.
We're 100 feet away. How close was this person? Are they still around?
Investigators say the attacks took place in the early morning hours Sunday, sometime after 1:45 a.m. But they didn't find the victims, Ethan Chapin, Zaina Kernodle, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Goncalves, until that afternoon when a 911 caller reported an unconscious person.
There's quite a bit of blood in the apartment, and it's a pretty traumatic scene to find 4 dead college students in a residence.
The prosecuting attorney telling NBC police do know who the 911 caller is, but will not release their name or information they received.
The investigators are trying to ascertain why there was a delay and what actually occurred, what was heard.
Police say there were no signs of forced entry in the home.
The evidence inside of the home leads us to believe that somebody targeted these individuals for some reason.
Law enforcement says surveillance video showing 2 of the victims ordering from a food truck that night is being used to establish a timeline. 2 of the victims attended a campus party. The 2 who visited the food truck had earlier gone to a bar in downtown Moscow. Police say the 2 roommates home at the time of the stabbings did not witness the attacks.
They were not injured, and that these 2 roommates actually have fully cooperated with detectives and have assisted in the investigation.
Are they considered suspects?
They haven't been ruled out.
We're not just focusing just on them, we're focusing on everybody that may be coming and going from that residence.
The campus now virtually empty, students excused from attending classes, and students also saying their sense of security has now been shattered.
And the fact that there's no answers is like the worst feeling ever. I know all of us are just waiting to get out of here as fast as we can.
It is 6:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As Ukrainian troops take back Kherson, dozens of civilian bodies have been found, scarred with signs of torture. Russia denies the military has been committing atrocities. The BBC's James Waterhouse has been speaking to people held captive by Russian forces for most of the year. And a warning, this report contains details that some may find distressing.
It's only once Russia leaves that you get a sense of what they've done. What allegedly happened here is a picture of brutality. This used to be a police station in Kherson. After Russian forces took control, officials say it became a torture chamber. Angela, a TV journalist, spent 31 days there.
On the 3rd floor, people, men, were beaten. On the 1st floor, we heard that it was electrocution. When the person is being tortured with electricity, you hear it. It is a peculiar sound.
After hearing what Angela's been through, you get a really vivid glimpse of what this place must have been like. There is still the smell of burning in the air, but the silence is almost deafening, and each one of these rooms has its own story, and all of them will come out over time. She shared cell number 6 with 4 other women. What she didn't know was that her boyfriend was there too.
There were some people who were electrocuted. It was horrible. One guy was brought to the cell after interrogation. His tongue was black. It was so swollen, he couldn't put it back in his mouth.
In Kherson, daily life runs alongside grim discoveries. A mass grave was found here. Elsewhere in the city, the bodies of 63 civilians were also found. They all, say investigators, showed signs of being tortured. There were more than 3,000 crimes committed throughout occupation, the chief investigator tells us. 90% of them are war crimes, including rape, torture and murder. As the evidence mounts, so do Moscow's denials of targeting civilians. But when Russia retreats, it leaves a now familiar footprint.
We've been hearing a lot about the rapid unravelling and collapse of international cryptocurrency exchange FTX, which left clients unable to withdraw millions of dollars. But that hasn't put off the president of El Salvador, who's intent on making Bitcoin into legal tender for his country. The BBC's Will Grant reports.
The El Salvadoran leader has been in bullish mood since the collapse of the FTX cryptocurrency exchange last week. A considerable drop in the value of Bitcoin in recent months stands to hurt El Salvador more than most, after President Bukele made the cryptocurrency legal tender in the Central American nation. The government in El Salvador has sunk around $400 million into Bitcoin, which has lost an estimated 60% of its value since the experiment began. Salvadorians, however, have been slow to adopt the cryptocurrency or involve it in their daily lives, as he had hoped. Nevertheless, Mr. Bukele refuses to accept the decision has been a mistake or that it will bring economic difficulties ahead. Immediately following the collapse of FTX, he said in a tweet that the exchange was the opposite of Bitcoin and that Bitcoin's protocols were created precisely to prevent, as he put it, such Ponzi schemes and bank runs. Now he has doubled down on his commitment to Bitcoin, saying, again via Twitter, that El Salvador would be buying 1 Bitcoin a day every day from now onwards.
Until now, the world's oldest tennis tournament, Wimbledon, has stuck to its traditions of more than a century ago, including the rule that players wear all white. But now women will be allowed to wear dark-coloured underwear after many female competitors spoke out about the anxiety of having to wear white while they have their period. The BBC's Chantal Hartle has the story.
Wimbledon's all-white dress code sets it apart from other Grand Slam tournaments where players have the freedom to choose what colours they wear. But it's been unpopular with female players for decades. The former Olympic champion Monica Puig talked about the mental stress of having to wear white, saying she used to pray the championships did not coincide with her period. And the Australian player Daria Saville said she altered her period specifically because of the dress code. The All England club, which runs the tournament, has responded by allowing women to wear mid or dark-coloured undershorts, provided they're no longer than their skirt. This summer, a small group of campaigners wearing red shorts gathered outside the gates at Wimbledon, carrying signs with the words "About bloody time" to protest the clothing rule. Gabriella Holmes, who organised the protest, explains why they did it.
We want to make it really known to Wimbledon that the rules that they make at the top, they're all filtering down to grassroots level. And we're already seeing tons of young girls who drop out of sport when they're on their periods, or by the time they hit puberty, they've stopped sport altogether. And yeah, we think it's time to try and address those barriers.
It's not only an issue for tennis. Female cricketers have also spoken about anxiety around bleeding in their whites. And several English football clubs have recently switched to dark-coloured shorts for their women's teams.
And finally tonight, you never know how your fur baby will react to a human one. CNN's Jenny Moose has the tale of how a newborn baby makes a jealous cat sick.
A beloved pet cat, a precious newborn. Their meeting was supposed to be a sentimental bonding moment to be savoured until... Uh-oh.
When did you realize that the cat was going to puke?
The second she started like doing that thing with her tongue and like kind of swallowed.
Caden and Katie Kazir, Salt Lake City, brought their 2-day-old daughter home and introduced her to their almost 3-year-old cat. Fifi sniffed the baby and backed off, and then took off for the other room. Seconds later, Fifi was heaving.
Really? Are you serious?
Serious? Folks found it hilarious when the couple posted the video on TikTok. Cats often gag when they don't like a smell, but such immediate feline hostility?
You're worried it was jealousy.
I think it's probably jealousy because the baby definitely didn't smell bad. She'd had a bath like a few hours before.
Jealous because Fifi used to be their newborn, and now she's barging into the interview trying to reclaim the limelight from this little upstart.
She just wants to be front and center all the time.
Caden holds the cat in his arms like his wife holds their daughter. Since that first fateful encounter, Fifi has steered clear of the baby.
Can you try to put them together?
We insisted on a reunion.
She's smelling pretty hard.
But at least this time, Fifi didn't throw up, even if she did get up and leave. One commenter channeled Fifi's thoughts. I don't want it, makes me sick, return it now. There's only room for one princess in this buggy.
For sure, Fifi, the cat princess, no doubt. Last words go to Trish from Karori on boot camps. She says, make boot camps great again. Well, thank you for all your feedback. That's about time, all we've got time for this evening. The Late News team will keep you updated throughout the night and obviously programs over the weekend. Do tune in. If you missed anything from the program, you can always find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcast from. And don't forget, kaua e wariware te atatiro I a mātou kōrero. A lot of our stories are online, including our videos. Do check some of those out. Do have a great evening and a fantastic weekend, and we'll catch you back on Monday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The Prime Minister has begun a flurry of meetings with regional leaders at the APEC summit in Bangkok, ahead of her meeting tonight with China's President Xi Jinping. A man who stabbed a Christchurch woman to death has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 13 years. Another 114 Wellington bus trips will be temporarily suspended from Sunday due to the driver shortage. And the president of Rugby League Samoa says Toa Samoa have united Samoans as they head into the final of the Rugby League World Cup this weekend. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This Sunday morning, the writer Scott Pape, his Barefoot Investor book is the biggest seller of the past decade in Australia. Now he's written Barefoot Kids, the university degrees people regret getting most. Dr. Zazie Todd answering your questions about dogs. And on another big rugby weekend, the book Invincible, about a man who came back from the First World War mentally shattered, but went on to captain the All Blacks. He was in the legendary team that beat the English at Twickenham nearly a century ago. Sunday morning from 8 o'clock on RNZ National.
Kia ora anō, you're listening to Trending Now. It's time for Focus on Politics.
This week saw Jacinda Ardern back on the international stage and at a precarious point in global relations. The world on tenterhooks with fears the war in Ukraine could spill beyond its borders.
We've been crystal clear that we will defend every inch of NATO territory.
Worst case scenario, the conflict spreads over the borders, then it becomes uncontrollable.
It is a time for cool heads, but it reinforces that this illegal invasion that Russia has undertaken in Ukraine has serious consequences.
Kia ora, ko Katie Scott Churaho, ane te pūrongo tōrangapū mō tēnei wiki. Welcome to Focus on Politics. News of a rocket blast in Poland broke early Wednesday morning in New Zealand. The details still sketchy.
Breaking news just coming in as we speak of a missile or missiles crossing into Poland, which of course is a NATO member. This is in relation obviously to the